to approach it just thinking big and thinking, you know, there are a tremendous amount of opportunities, I think, and you know, if we can act on them, then we're going to find there's going to be lots of moments of anger to take advantage of, lots of moments of the friction that, you know, whether it's a immigration raid or whether it's a student, you know, strike, or what the things are that are going to happen, and it's hard to know what is going to be the triggers, but there are going to be a lot of triggers to, you know, a lot of moments where you could see the opportunity to mobilize a mass movement in the way that we're talking about that can move all the struggles forward. And so to be thinking all the time, for everyone to be thinking all the time in what's happening around us. In a general, as a general perspective, we've had like shut down London. We've had that as a perspective to, this is something, you know, this is like, we were talking about this yesterday, but as opposed to, you know, like there's a demand other people put forward, which is like general strike, which is very much like we're calling on the trade unions to do something. Shut down London for us has been like the disruption of a general strike, you know, like the whatever it's, but it's like a way to escalate struggles that students, that young people could act on and escalate. Like, it's kind of like ending business as usual and finding ways to escalate the struggles. And in a general sense, like, that's something, it's a perspective around holding on to like what we have so far. In Movement for Justice, we've talked a lot in the last, like, yesterday and today, and it's clear every time you look around the room how much, like, the question of the immigrant struggles, immigrant rights struggles are so central. And we need to find a way that we can protect the victories that we've had around the people who've won cases, because we're in the kind of situation where things can change very rapidly. For example, if Uganda has a new government, then, and they say, you know, we're gonna be, you know, we're gonna look more left, you know, then Britain says, well, Uganda's a safe place now. They've got a different government. And, you know, the same cases that have been going forward before with the same evidence suddenly aren't winning cases anymore. Like, it's not, these questions aren't about protecting the people, they're not about real things, but it's a political question. And so we've got to find ways, we need to talk more about how we're finding ways that we can broaden out the struggle. Recognizing the changing situation, the changing like politics here and in other countries, like how we're broadening out the struggle. How are we gonna, like, how we can break down the differences between different immigrant groups? Like, for example, so if you're Kurdish, then if you're African, then if you're somewhere else, you know, how do we make a breakthrough where the fight for immigrant rights can be broadened and generalized, and that we're pulling in more of the different groups that are fighting, like that are fighting for broader questions about, you know, immigrant rights. And there's that. We were discussing just now, like, this question of like, why is it that Britain in particular, like, has such a rate of immigration, that there is a way in which that there's something progressive too in Britain that means people come here and to some degree can, you know, like, stay here. That there is, I mean, I remember it wasn't so long ago that you had the Strangers to Citizenship campaigns, for example, that drew in lots and lots of churches and schools and things like that. And it was like a amalgamation of, like, people from, you know, who are waging political struggles on lots of things, but, like, were, like, making fights around there should be some passage to being a citizen in this country, that there's something that we can tap into that's progressive, that people feel, when you think that anywhere in the country, even in islands or small towns in sort of Scotland, I remember, there'd be like a village and then they'd all be mobilized to defend some person who was going to be deported. And it would be like somewhere that you'd think was some conservative place way out in the middle of nowhere, but then, you know, there would be, there's something that people feel that, you know, Britain is multicultural, it is integrated, and that's got to be, you know, the Liberal Democrats, you know, have had the position that's been like, there should be amnesty, there should be regularization, there should be an ability to stay here. And as spineless as they are, they quickly dropped that when they joined the Tories. But nevertheless, there's something progressive. Well, there's something that's that it isn't uniform in Britain, that you're just, you know, deporting, that you're just, you know, sending people away. And that's not just, you know, that's just, anyway, there's something in it that's an opportunity to understand that we could take advantage of in building our movement. What I was saying about like the different communities and the kind of contradiction, the competition, because there's a way in which, you know, we've been involved, engaged in struggles, and come up against the differences between like a Kurdish community and, you know, Black African community, or like, you know, and clashes. And there's a way in which like we don't want to see a situation of slipping into the kind of competition for whatever the number of kind of places there are before the government, you know, is like, we've had enough now everyone else goes. And it's a danger. The kind of, I mean, Britain is an expert at divide and rule, and it's a real danger in that we have to find a way to break through any competition and bring together immigrant communities. And if we're not, then we're in a situation where it's too divided, it's too fragile, it's too much like, well, this country, you know, politically is considered this at the moment, and so we grant people, but then that changes, and then the same evidence, as with Gigi, I mean, Tony was saying, okay, if you had the same evidence, you'd have got through your interview without ever having to go to court. If this was 5-10 years ago. These are all fragile, these are all changeable, they change rapidly, and like if we're not, you know, if there isn't that kind of broader movement, then you end up, you can't win on, you're just too much in the game of like trying to, of discrete battles around specific fleeting interests and stuff. And so it's perspectives around that. But we're in such a position to do a huge amount around like all of this. And there's two kind of specific, I mean, leaving aside, okay, there might be any number of things happening the next day, week, month that, you know, demands action, that's an opportunity, as we were talking about before. There's also like, come the end of May, we've talked really briefly about this Black Student Conference that's happening. And like, there's, for everyone here, for anyone, like we gotta think in terms of leading these, of really leading, of being the people who stand in those positions, who are elected, who are, you know, like who are taking the lead. Because the reality is whoever's in the position is kind of regarded as a leader and representative because you're in the position and that's how it is. Like that's, you know, that's the formal, you know. But like we gotta give people, you know, the kind of leadership that is fighting to win, the kind of leadership we've been talking about over the last 2 days,